Hello, Hymn Society friends. I'm sure this isn't quite the conference you had in mind for 2020, but this 2020 isn't quite the year we had in mind for 2020 either. But I am so honored that you came to the sectional, even virtual, to hear and sing some of the hymns from my first collection, Protest of Praise. And it's so very appropriate that this collection is first showcased at the Hymn Society because this book would not exist without it. As many of you no doubt have experienced at your first conference, it's quite a thrill to come to that first meeting. For me, it was 2013 in Richmond. And find yourself surrounded by the people who have written so many of the hymns and songs of the faith that have been meaningful to you. And it was for me. But for me, it also gave rise to another thought that maybe some of you experienced. Oh, they're humans. These songs don't just fall from the heavens fully formed. And that gave me the idea that maybe this was something that I could do too. And so after the 2014 conference in Columbus, I was boarding the shuttle to head back to the airport to catch my flight to Boston. And one of the only seats left on the shuttle was next to Sister Dolores Duffner, who the previous year with Ruth Duck had been named a fellow. And so I sat down next to her, steeled my nerves, which is funny to think that now knowing Sister Dolores, that I would have to steel my nerves to talk to her, and asked, what advice would you give for a person who's trying to start writing hymns? I know she gave me good advice, but I don't remember that specifically. What I do remember was her generosity in sharing her wisdom in craft. And on that flight home, I wrote my first not very good hymn text for a friend's wedding. And that began my journey in text writing. And I'll talk more about different things, but that's probably enough talking for now. So let's start with a song, maybe a familiar tune to get us all singing. Let's do Praise the Source Who Sang Creation. This was a hymn commissioned by Kelly Grooms and George Payne's, their organ company, Grooms and Paynes, for a restoration they did of an organ at Covenant Presbyterian in Roanoke. And in it, I'm trying to imagine the singing Trinity, God the source singing Jesus, the word, the song, by the power of the Spirit's breath. So let's sing together.
Praise the source who sang creation, chanting darkness into light, bombing planets into calling out the day from night. Praise the primal notes that made us, cosmic choir where all belong, and repeat our Maker's anthem. Praise the source of every song. Praise the song made flesh in Jesus, echoing through time and space, blending dissonance together into harmonies of grace. Praise the melody once silenced, sounding from the void of death, and resounding here among us. Praise the song with every breath. Praise the breath that tunes all nature to the source's endless song, animating lifeless places, making feeble voices strong. Praise the wind that topples boundaries, shaping worlds that yet might be, and inspiring all our music. Praise the singing Trinity.
The next hymn I'd like to sing together is Advent Begins in the Darkness of Night. Advent is my very favorite of the church seasons, and I've made it a habit of trying to write a new hymn text each Advent. And this one is particularly important to me because it was my first collaboration with Ben Brody. After I wrote this, I posted it on Facebook, and Ben, in his gracious way, said, "Do you mind if I try setting a tune to this?" I, of course, immediately jumped at it, having heard some of his collaborations with Adam Tice. And this one was important because it was the first, and it also led to my partnership with GIA, for which I am very grateful. It started with a quote from Fleming Rutledge, who has remarked that Advent begins in the dark. And the text is captured so beautifully by Ben's tune. So let's sing together, Advent Begins.
Advent begins in the darkness of night, waiting and watching for signs of a light, walking in faith that the path will appear, daring to follow in spite of our fear. Advent begins with our dreams yet deferred. Love sounds ridiculous, prayer seems absurd, but in the midst of life's endless maze, we lift together our protest of praise. Advent begins in a precious domain, marked by the cries of confusion and pain. Yet hope is kindled where justice is done, mercy is nurtured and peace is begun. Advent goes on till the promised dawn breaks. Tyrants are toppled and God's dream awakes. Hope is perfected and faith is made sight. Love is our center and Christ is our light.
But I've become more and more convinced over the last several years that we need even more hymns that talk about the positive aspects of darkness. I realize we have some, but I think we could use even more. Not only to overcome the dichotomy of light is good and dark is bad, and the damage that is done, especially when conflated with race, where darkness and blackness are conflated as bad, and whiteness and lightness are conflated with goodness, but also to expand our theological imagination so we can see why we need darkness in a balanced faith just as much as we need light. So I wrote this next text, Darkness is a Gift of God, to explore the positive aspects of darkness for our faith. And Lim Swee Hong wrote a gorgeous tune for the song, and I think it especially is good for evening prayers or longest night services. Susie Bird, as many of you know at the Hymn Society, will be leading it in the next video, and we're going to sing the refrain after the first stanza, the third stanza, and the fourth stanza, and we'll repeat it once again at the end. Let's sing together.
Darkness is a gift of God that cools the heat of day, a sacred place for resting and holy time for play. Darkness is a gift of God that sets a vision free, for in the deepest darkness the heart begins to see. Darkness is a gift of God, an unexpected grace. For when we race toward ruin, it slows our frantic pace. Darkness is a gift of God that shrouds all that will be, and keeps our futures open, preserving mystery. Darkness is a gift of God that sets our vision free, for in the deepest darkness the heart begins to see. Darkness is a gift of God, revealing hidden light. The galaxies of wonder we only glimpse in night. Darkness is a gift of God that sets our vision free, for in the deepest darkness the heart begins to see. Darkness is a gift of God that sets our vision free, for in the deepest darkness the heart begins to see.
Like darkness, I think that doubt's got a bad rap in Christianity too, especially in much of our congregational song. It's often seen as oppositional to faith rather than a component part. I've heard it said that the opposite of faith is not doubt, but the opposite of faith is certainty. Because faith can only be faith by definition when we are not certain, when it's the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, as Hebrews says. So I have two hymns I want to look at that explore doubt. The first is Ask the Complicated Questions, and I'll sing the first stanza and read the subsequent stanzas. And it uses those action verbs from the Sermon on the Mount of Matthew 7, ask, seek, knock, to explore the questions of doubt. So we'll start here on what might be close to an F. Ask the complicated questions, do not fear to be found out, for our God makes strong our weakness, forging faith in fires of doubt. Seek the disconcerting answers, follow where the Spirit blows, test competing truths for wisdom, for intention, new life grows. Knock on doors of new ideas, test assumptions long grown stale. For Christ calls from shores of wonder, daring us to try and fail. For in struggle we discover truth both simple and profound. In the knocking, asking, seeking, we are opened, answered, found. The next hymn is also about doubt, and it came from a sermon I gave on the topic, and it was really inspired by a quote from Barbara Brown Taylor, which you can see on the bottom. Doubt often brings me to poke at what I believe, and when it topples, I realize it was an idol. And so doubt has been a divine gift that has led me deeper into God. And so thinking about doubt as possibly a gift, I wrote this text. And Sally Morris provided this wonderful driving triplet tune that underscores the lively and positive effect that doubt can play in our faith if we use it as a tool. So I will turn it over to Sally.
Spirit send out when our faith turns to fact, that harden to doctrines obscure and abstract. Come teach us the wisdom of story and song, that help us live answers beyond right and wrong. Oh, Spirit, send out when our faith turns to pride, and build bigger walls to keep others outside. Come teach us the wisdom of letting you choose the scope and extravagance of your good news. Oh, Spirit, send out when our faith turns to fear of all that is foreign, uncommon, or queer. Come teach us the wisdom of all we find strange, that baffles our bias and leads us to change. Oh, Spirit, send out as a gift of your grace to topple the idols still shrouding your face. Come teach us the wisdom of all we yet know, for only in wonder can faith finally grow.
Last year, I was honored to be asked to contribute to a Festschrift for my former seminary history professor, Phil Anderson. For those of you not in the world of academia, Festschrift is just a fancy German word to mean a book in honor of someone. And in addition to writing that, which was on communion theology in the Evangelical Covenant Church, our tradition, I also was asked to write a hymn. And so as I was thinking about what to write this hymn about, one of the things that Phil and I share in common is a love for the North Shore of Lake Superior in Minnesota. I grew up in Duluth, and he has a home in Hovland, which is near Grand Marais and the Boundary Waters, further north on the shore. So I decided to use that imagery from nature, especially rivers and trees and forests, and explore the way they can teach us to praise God. One of the bonuses about this was I was able to use the love above rhymes, so maligned and overused in a hopefully a natural way. And what this made this hymn especially exciting was I had the opportunity to collaborate with another North Shore resident and friend of Phil's, Bill Beckstrand. And Phil had been on us for years to collaborate together, so it was really a thrill to be able to do this as a surprise for Phil and to play it for him for the first time at the Swedish American Museum in Chicago. And I was so pleased with the tune that Bill wrote, and he will now play and sing it for us.
I'm William Beckstrand. I'm here at Trinity Lutheran Church on the North Shore of Lake Superior, just a few miles from Canada, and presenting this new hymn, As Rivers Flow from a Distant Spring.
As rivers flow from a distant spring to quench our thirst and feed the earth,
In 2017, the Hymn Society, as many of you will remember, put together the collection Singing Welcome, Hymns and Songs of Hospitality to Refugees and Immigrants. And I was thrilled to be a part of the working group that put that together. And I also wanted to include, or try to include, my own song in that collection. And so I had been singing a couple different songs to Noel Novelette. Dum bum 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 bum. And a couple of them were more of the protest vein. So one was Adam Tice's Draw a Wider Circle, or perhaps a race. Another one was John Bell's Jesus Christ is raging, raging in the street, which I think is the second stanza of Jesus Christ is waiting. So I had this idea of Noel Novelette as a more of a protest tune. And one day I was, I'd been on Facebook and I'd seen that quote that said, when you have more than you need, build a longer table, not a higher fence. And so I was out for a run, and all of a sudden those two ideas, that tune and that text, came together in my head and saying, build a longer table, not a higher wall. And so when I got home from a run, I sweatily started writing down notes, and this was the song that came, and I was happy that it was also included in Singing Welcome. I did not judge that one, so there was no bias in choosing it. And it's one that my only recommendation is that you take it a little quicker than often Noel Novelette is played. More bum bum ba da ba bum, not in that key, obviously. So Ben will lead us in Build a Longer Table, which continues to be my prayer during this time.
Build a longer table, not a higher wall, feeding those who hunger, making room for all, feasting together, stranger turns to friend, Christ breaks laws to pieces, false divisions end. Build a safer refuge, not a larger jail, where the weak find shelter, mercy will not fail. For any place where justice is denied, Christ will breach the jail wall, freeing all inside. Build a broader doorway, not a longer fence. Love protects all people, sparing no expense. When we embrace compassion more than fear, Christ tears down our fences, all are welcome here. When we live as exiles, refugees abroad, Christ became our doorway to the reign of God. So must our tables welcome those who roam. None can be excluded, all must find a home.
Many of you have probably never heard of the Evangelical Covenant Church, and not that I blame you. It's a very small denomination that originated out of the Swedish Pietist movement, but it's where I've been the last 15 years as both a pastor and a teacher at their seminary. And one of my favorite hymns in our hymnal, the 1996 Covenant Hymnal Worship Book, Adam Tice always likes to joke that we stole the title "A Worship Book" from Mennonites who did it a few years earlier, which is probably true. But one of my favorite hymns in our hymnal is "Hide Not Your Face." It's a text by Lena Sandell. Lena Sandell is to the Swedish Pietist movement as Charles Wesley is to the Methodists. She's kind of the hymn writer of note. But one of the reasons I love it is not only for the text, but the tune it's set to, which is a Finnish melody. And so the song goes, "Hide not your face, O my Savior, be near me. Comfort and bless while I pray, will you hear me? Blessed Redeemer, my Savior and Comforter, are you coming soon? Are you coming soon?" Lutherans in the group might say, "Hey, I know that." There's a famous choral rendition of it, "Lost in the Night." But I've always been drawn to this tune as well because I think it makes for a beautiful minor Advent tune. And I've always been trying to set it to an Advent text, and I could never quite find a way into it. I knew I needed something for that refrain, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it wasn't until I was at church, at an ELCA church actually, and it was the first Sunday in Advent. I can't remember what year it is now, B or C, but it has that beautiful text, "Oh, that you would tear open the heavens and come down." And as I was sitting listening to the sermon, all of a sudden it came, "Come Emmanuel, come Emmanuel." And then I started singing, "Come now, O God, when our hopes are forsaken." And like a bad parishioner, for the rest of the sermon, I was scribbling out a rough draft of this text. And so here is, "Come now, O God."
Come now, O God, when our love is forsaken. Come when our bedrock of faith has been shaken. Come when our deepest of hopes are mistaken. Come, Emmanuel. Come, Emmanuel. Come when we squander the freedom you gave us. Come, break the systems of sin that enslave us. Come, though we wonder if you can still save us. Come, Emmanuel. Come, Emmanuel. Come, lead us out of our self-serving madness. Come while the world is enshrouded in sadness. Come, turn the tears of our mourning to gladness. Come, Emmanuel. Come, Emmanuel.
If you were at the Hymn Society conference last year, you'll remember the hymnal showcase for a Santo, 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 Holy, 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 a completely bilingual hymnal that was put together by GIA and the Calvin Institute of Christian Worship. And it's a wonderful resource with many new translations, both from English to Spanish and from Spanish to English. And I was asked to do two translations. I did Los cielos cuentan la gloria de Dios, which I translated as "The heavens tell of your creative glory." But the first one I was asked to do was the one we'll sing now, which is "Cuando el mundo padece tiranías," when the world is controlled by petty tyrants. And I didn't know, just because I had written hymns, I didn't know if that would necessarily mean I could translate effectively. So this was kind of an experiment for me. And it was a really fun experiment, in part because I got a wonderful song and text by Joel Sierra. And the literal translation, "When our world is controlled by tyrants," because it didn't quite fit the meter into English, I had to add words. And petty seemed like a good word for our time right now. And I think one of the reasons I was so attracted to this song is because we're seeing so much leadership that seems to be about itself and power and control. And we're given such a different version of leadership in the Bible, especially in the person of Christ. And so this song sings of the leaders I think we should look for in our churches and our world. So let's sing it together. And as a note, the first verse will be sung in Spanish. We'll sing the refrain in English, the next verse in English, and then end with the Spanish refrain.
Cuando el mundo padece tiranías, aparatos de odio y de mentiras, que los siervos de tu reino se mantengan como ejemplo contrastante de servicio. Si en el mundo los jefes se agigantan, manejando sus deseos de poder, que tu pueblo sea fiel a tu mensaje, pues conquistas lavando nuestros pies. May the voice that they hear be ours no longer, and may the only name we honor be your own. May your fame now decrease and yours grow stronger. May all people worship you and you alone. May the voice that they hear be ours no longer, and may the only name we honor be your own. May our fame now decrease and yours grow stronger. May all people bow down to you alone. May we care for the suffering and despairing, and seek out all your people still in danger. May our lives become your instruments of mercy, as we see the face of Jesus in the stranger. May the roads that we walk be peace and justice, and the words that we speak be good and true, as we learn from the shepherd of all people, for his kind, humble service points to you. Que se escuche tu voz y no la mía, que los hermanos te adoren solo a ti, que yo mengue, tú crezcas cada día, que se postren a tus pies y no hacia mí, que se escuche tu voz y no la mía, que las hermanas te adoren solo a ti, que yo vengo y tú crezcas cada día, que se postren rendidos a tus pies.
Many of you are no doubt familiar with that passage from Hebrews 12, for our God is a consuming fire. I grew up in a tradition, a Pentecostal, evangelical, fundamentalist tradition, where that was terrifying news to me. When I thought of fires, I thought of hell and being left behind in the rapture and this God of wrath and punishment. And so I've always felt a little leery of a text like that. What does it mean for God to be a consuming fire? But this changed in part after I read from George MacDonald's Unspoken Sermons. George MacDonald was a Scottish pastor. He's probably best known now to be kind of the forerunner of C.S. Lewis, who wrote a lot of children's allegorical Christian stories. But he was also a universalist, and so he read through this lens that God was going to work until God saved us all. And so when he came to this passage in Hebrews, for our God is a consuming fire, he didn't doubt that God was fire, but he said this fire is what saves us. It's what burns away the chains that bind us. And I so love this idea that even God's fire is grace, even God's fire is mercy. And so I wrote, God, we fear your fire. And I sent it to Sally Morris. First, she wanted to do something to The Doors' Light My Fire, but after she tried that for a while, she came with this beautiful tune. It really captures the sparse and tight nature of what I was thinking when I wrote this short text. God, we fear your fire.
God, we fear your fire and run when you draw near. But let us brave the blazing, come burn away our fear. God, we fear your fire, revealing what we hide. But let us face our failings, come burn away our pride. God, we fear your fire, because we dread your blame. But let us trust your mercy, come burn away our shame. God, we fear your fire, but even more our chains. Come burn away what binds us, till only love remains.
I've always been fascinated by the story of the Ethiopian eunuch, as many of you probably are. It's the story of an outsider of outsiders, really, of a different nationality, a different race, a different sexual identity than those first Christians. And yet, when we talk about this story, I think we often focus on the Ethiopian eunuch's conversion, which is understandable. But I think the last time I preached on this text, the thing that jumped out to me was really Philip's conversion was needed as much, if not more, than the Ethiopians. His assumptions were challenged. The things he thought about insider and outsider were challenged. And he experienced a conversion that day just as much as the Ethiopian. And so I wrote this text, especially thinking about the LGBTQ community and the way they still call for the conversion of so many in the church. And it was included in Songs for the Holy Other, a collection of queer hymnody that was put together by the Hymn Society, and I was grateful to be a part of the working group that helped put that together. So let's sing I Met a Stranger on the Road.
I met a stranger on the road who read a book alone, whose skin was dark and language strange, who sat
Oftentimes, memories from your doctoral work aren't always pleasant. And it might not have been pleasant at the time, but one of my fond memories now is thinking back to when I lived in this huge house and I rented just this very small room in it. And I used to have piles of books next to me, and one night I was laying in bed reading one of the pile, and it was Alan Luff's work on Welsh hymnody. Alan Luff was an expert there, and he died this past year, so part of this can be in honor of his memory. And I was kind of humming the tunes, trying to figure out the ones I hadn't heard before. And as I was flipping through, I came upon this tune that we're going to sing next, Stay With Me, The Night Has Come. And I'd never heard it, and even with my terrible sight singing abilities, I could sense that it was beautiful, this da 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 da. So I looked it up online, and I came across this trio, Plethlin, which I'm probably butchering that Welsh, and they sang, and it was just so incredibly beautiful, and I thought this should be sung by congregations. And as I played it a couple times, the imagery that came was Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, overcome with his grief, calling on his disciples to stay with him and watch with him and pray with him. And so this first stanza, Stay with me, the night has come, and soon it will be morning, came fairly quickly, and the song actually came fairly quickly after that. The recording we're going to watch is a Mennonite group that sang this song. This one will be included in the new Mennonite hymnal and was part of a Lenten sampler, so this is what the video comes from. So please sing along.
Stay with me, the night has come. Stay with me, the night has come. Stay with me, the night has come. And soon it will be morning. And soon it will be morning. Pray with me, the night has come. Pray with me, the night has come. Pray with me, the night has come. And soon it will be morning. And soon it will be morning. Wash with me, the night has come. Wash with me, the night has come. Wash with me, the night has come. And soon it will be morning. And soon it will be morning. Weep with me, the night has come. Weep with me, the night has come. Weep with me, the night has come. And soon it will be morning. And soon it will be morning.
So I have a confession to make. I've never been a huge fan of the hymn, The God of Abram Praise. And I think it has little to do with the words, but often the tune Leone, I find it played fairly slow. And so it never had clicked for me. And then one day I was listening to Maddie Pryor, an English folk singer who I'm sure many of you are aware of, and I heard her version, which was much more upbeat. The God of Abram praise, bum 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 bum, had this kind of light folk feel to it. And it was stuck in my head, and as I was thinking about it, I was thinking, yeah, the God of Abram praise, but also the God of Sarah and the God of Hagar. And so I tried to use 3 stanzas in this tune to look at each of the characters and the way in which they teach us about God and about praising God. So let's sing together, The God of Sarah Praise. As I mentioned before, Advent is my favorite season of the church year, and as you can see from my subject index, I like singing about it and writing about it. And I found it funny that my subject index, I think the 2 biggest are Advent and Justice, so there you go. But one of the things I noticed this last year when I was trying to write is I was having trouble finding a text or finding a meter that worked. I'd written mostly in longer meters, so like Advent Begins, I think is 10, 10, 10, 10, and some others were 7, 6, 7, 6D. But this year, nothing seemed to be coming out. And so I decided maybe I need to pare it down. Maybe something about Advent this Advent particularly, is calling for less and not more. And so I tried to write a very simple text that could be used with the refrain, and this is what came of it. And I believe I sent it to Randy, and it might have even been the same day or at the latest the next. He sent back this tune, which is lovely. And so as Randy rides out into the sunset of his retirement, I wanted to sing this not only to show the text, but to show Randy's consummate skill and to give gratitude and thanks for the ways in which he has enriched the songs of the church through his work, not only at GIA, but as a church musician for so many years. So thank you, Randy.
I thank my 2 pastors, Pastor David Bjorlin and Pastor Carla Halverson, for singing along. I have the privilege of singing with them every Sunday, even more so now pronounced that we're recording our services. So thank you very much.
introducing the last song that we're going to sing together, I want to thank a few more people who made this collection possible. I obviously have already thanked Randy, my editor, for this work, but also I want to thank everyone at GIA, without whom this collection wouldn't exist, and who do so much for the church's song. I want to thank all the composers who wrote tunes for my texts. I think you've heard from all of them in the course of this sectional, but for Ben, Sally, Randy, Swee Hong, and Bill, thank you. I'm in awe of the way you use your craft for the good of the church and make texts sing. I want to give special thanks to my hymn writing mentor, the person who's taught me more about the craft than anyone, and that's Adam Tice. And I'm so excited that he will be now working with GIA, doing this for part of his profession, and it's definitely his vocation. He has taught me much, not only about the craft, but about the generosity of hymn writers and the way we hand on the craft from one generation to the next. And finally, I want to thank you, members of the Hymn Society. I wouldn't have even dreamed this would be possible if I hadn't attended in 2013 in Richmond. And so many people, whether they know of us or not, have been touched by the Hymn Society, and I continue to be so grateful for the work we do in enlivening the church's song. So this final hymn is When Our Daily Bread, and it came as a result of kind of a combination of Matthew 6, the Sermon on the Mount part where Jesus is telling them not to worry, to consider the birds, and also a poem by Wendell Berry, The Peace of Wild Things, where he says when he's overwhelmed, he goes to the woods to find the peace of wild things. And the kind of Easter egg of this is the tune name, Talus Patronum. If you are both a church music fan and a Harry Potter fan, if that Venn diagram overlaps, you'll get the joke of it. So let's hear When Our Daily Bread, and sing together When Our Daily Bread.
Our daily bread is chaos and dread that fills us with worry and feeds on despair, and all that we fear draws suddenly near. You call us outside to consider your care. Consider the bird, unseen yet still heard, that sings in the hedge of your sheltering grace. If you mark the fall of something so small, then all must be held in your boundless embrace. Consider the flower with no earthly power, that grows with no thought of its beauty or yield, yet no royal crown, no scepter or gown could rival the splendor of one blooming field. Consider the world, your glory unfurled, that no mind can fathom or hope to explain, yet its good design is for us a sign that all can find rest in your wonder-filled reign.
Hello, Hymn Society friends. I'm Adam Tice, editor for Congregational Song at GIA Publications. We're pleased to offer you 3 new collections this year: Protest of Praise by David Bjorlin, Today I Live by Carlton Young, and Beauty's Blaze, tunes by Randy Sensmeyer. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to get your hands on these collections, so they are available for order in hard copy format as well as digital download from giamusic.com. And we're also introducing a new feature this year, giamusic.com/unbound. At Unbound, you can purchase each of these hymns individually in full score format. You can go and choose the hymns that you want, search by scripture or theme or title or author or composer, and then get a minimum download of 2 copies at $2.50 a piece. That way you can purchase copies for each of your musicians, organists, or even your full choir. In addition, you all know about onelicense.net, where you can secure permission for congregational use for any of these songs, as well as download melody-only versions for congregational use. So please keep your use legal. That's the way we support our artists. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to my sectional. I am so thrilled and honored that you would take time to do this, and I'm so happy this digital format gives us the opportunity to see other sectionals that we might not get to see because they would be going on at the same time. My last pitch is to remember to report these songs to One License and all songs. It's the way that artists get paid and can continue to do this work. And I end with a thought from St. Augustine. He said, "Sing but keep going," and I would say sing and keep going. During these challenging times, song is one of the gifts we are given, and even if we can't sing together, we know that the song goes on.